Welcome everyone to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit 2019. I'm really happy to welcome our guest, Dr. Rick Hanson, who joined us last year. We had lots of great feedback about all the advice he gave us and the tips, so I'm really happy to welcome him. He's a psychologist and a senior fellow at the Greater Good Science Center at University of California, Berkeley, which is an amazing place. I've been to the Educator Institute there. He's a New York Times bestseller with many books, including Resilient, Hardwiring Happiness, Buddha's Brain, Just One Time, and Just One Thing, and Mother Nurture. And he's also the founder of the Wellspring Institute for Neuroscience and Contemplative Wisdom. And I highly recommend you all join his newsletter. He sends out an amazing letter with lots of tips and information. He runs courses online and he does all kinds of things that are really helpful. So I encourage you to check that out. And he's also given us a mindfulness, how to start practicing mindfulness PDF. So you can download that as well. But welcome, Rick, and thank you so much for joining us.
I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad we're doing this. Thank you, and greetings to everyone listening or watching.
Great, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about resilience. So first of all, how would you just define resilience in general?
Right. I would define it as having two aspects: surviving the worst day of your life and thriving every day of your life. In other words, resilience is what we have inside us that enables us to handle challenges to our needs or the needs of others while staying on an even keel, even as the waves of life come through. And the purpose of resilience certainly is coping, but the purpose of coping and resilience generally is well-being. Resilience is a means to an end. It's not just an end in itself. And I think sometimes people make two kind of mistakes these days when they think about resilience. First, they think about it as only being relevant to trauma. Well, it's relevant to trauma, the worst day of your life, but it's really relevant to everyday functioning and moving forward through stresses and obstructions, including with other people every day. And the other thing that people, I think, often misunderstand about resilience is that they focus on it in terms of a kind of grim, fortitude. And if you're not miserable, you're not really paying attention, right? And the point of resilience is to help us be happy, a deep, fundamental inner peace and contentment and love. That's what I mean by happiness. And that's the point of resilience.
Right, lovely. And when we think about a resilient mindset and a kind of non-resilient mindset, can you give us some of the characteristics?
Yeah, great. So if lasting well-being in a changing world comes from resilience, as well as some other things, but resilience is necessary for lasting well-being in a changing world. What is necessary for resilience? Resilience comes from psychological resources inside us, like determination or gratitude or skillfulness with our own mind or with other people, or self-compassion or self-worth. That's where resilience comes from. So the question then becomes, how do we get those inner resources inside ourselves or inside our children, or even helping other adults to acquire these over time? About a third of who we are is innate, and its causes are innate, based in our DNA, essentially, in our biology. The other 2/3, though, in principle, is what we acquire over time, which is both very hopeful, but kind of old school because it takes us to responsibility. No one can stop us from acquiring more inner strengths, inner resources over time, but no one can do it for us. So my own work, as you know, is very focused on that fundamental process of acquiring, of developing, of growing the good inside ourselves, how to actually do that, and then apply those general methods of growing the good to growing any particular things you want to develop in yourself or inside your children.
I think that's wonderful because it gives everyone hope, doesn't it? It's,
Yeah, totally.
we can all, grow and get better and develop these skills. So
Yeah.
I think that's really important for people to know, because some people do think it's that they can't change, but actually I
No.
think everybody can if we just learn how. So
Yeah.
that's
And as you know, I have a special interest in the neurological basis of personal development. And I'm pointing at my head because that's the primary location where the physical basis of change for the better occurs. But it's really the whole body, including especially its nervous system, that's involved in the change process. And it's really inspiring, as you say, for people to appreciate that their mental practices, just like, you can build a muscle through physical practice, you can build inner resources like happiness or self-confidence or patience with others, including your children. You can develop these things in yourself,
Yes.
which involves physical changes inside your own brain and body.
Yeah. So let's talk about the patience one, because we have lots of teachers and parents of preschoolers watching. So how can they themselves and me develop more patience and more kind of in towards the kids that we're working with, or towards our own children.
Well, first let me frame my answer, if I could, with two little points, and then I'll get into the practical of this. The first frame is to recognize, of course, the world around us and our physical bodies make a big difference, right? So before I talk about how to change the mind for the better, I want to just acknowledge that it's really important to change the world for the better and to protect the physical health of yourself and other people. Sometimes people think that if you focus on the mind, that means you are accepting the world as it is with all its problems and not dealing with it. I say, no, we need to do both. We need to help the world. We need to help ourselves. First point. Second, my own background, which you know some of. My doctoral dissertation was on 15-month-olds. I'm extremely interested in the 0 to 3 period and children in general. I've done a lot of child therapy. I've worked in a lot of schools, including a lot of time in preschools. And I think there's a special place in heaven for school teachers and educators in general. So that's my own kind of background here. So now let's talk about the fundamental, I'll say it in a fancy way, the fundamental neuropsychology of learning, and learning broadly, including healing, developing, transforming, growing. What's the fundamental neuropsychology? It's summarized in this famous saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. It's a two-stage process. First, we must experience what we want to grow. We must have experiences of patience if we want to develop more patience, or experiences of factors of patience, like relaxing the body, or putting things in perspective, or feeling supported and protected by other people, to name a few factors of patience. We must experience them. We must get those neurons firing together first. We must have the experience. But second, critically important, we must help them wire together. Otherwise, they're firing. The experience is wasted. Wasted on the brain. It might be momentarily better than the alternative, but by definition, if there's no wiring, there's no lasting value. And that's the dirty little secret in parenting and teaching and being a therapist or a coach or a mindfulness teacher, all of which I do. If we do not pay attention to the wiring together phase of the development process, we are missing so many opportunities to harvest and get the most from our experiences. So from a practical standpoint, I'll say 3 ways that are neurologically based in research that people can use with themselves and with their children and with their friends to help experiences have the most lasting impact, and to help themselves steepen their growth curve as they go through life. 3 simple ways to help those neurons wire together. Ready? Okay, 3. I can remember 3 things. 4, I have to write them down. 3, I remember. So 1, stay with the experience for a breath or 2 or longer. Keep those neurons firing together so they have a chance to start wiring into you, literally hardwiring into your own body, the benefits of the experience. Stay with it rather than getting distracted or scooting on to the next thing. Second, try to feel as much as you can in your body. The more that, as every teacher knows, the more that an experience is embodied, the more that it's sensed, the richer it is emotionally, even the more there's action involved with it, including subtle actions of posture and facial expression, the more the experience will sink in. Feel it in your body. The third suggestion is to focus on what's rewarding about it, what's enjoyable or sweet or meaningful or heart-touching or inspiring. And the more we focus on what's rewarding about an experience, the more that engages systems in the brain, especially those involving neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine, which therefore flag the experiences for prioritization. They prioritize the experiences we're having when they're rewarding to really help them go into long-term storage. So the essence is really simple. Stay with it, feel it in your body, and highlight what's rewarding about it. And when you do that for a half a dozen or a dozen seconds in a row, or even a little longer, a few times a day, you will be making substantial beneficial changes in your own brain that will benefit you the rest of your life.
Right. Wow, that sounds great. And people always want instant results, but does this process, would that happen quickly, or does it take a long time? Or
in a sense, we're talking, to simplify, about developing a habit. In a sense, we're talking about moving technically from states to traits. So instead of having simply states of gratitude or states of patience or mindfulness, we're talking about developing the trait of patience, the trait of mindfulness or gratitude. All right. And so it depends on, how far down a person is and how much there is to do, just to be realistic. That said, my experience is that if people focus on developing a particular thing a few times a day for less than 30 seconds at a time, less than half a minute at a time, they will feel something different in the first day.
Wow.
If they do it for a week, a few times a day, for a week, they will almost always feel something really significant is changing. And certainly if they stick with it for a month, you really can establish a major shift inside yourself. And if you can't, and sometimes you can't, that's an indicator that there's something to look at in your physical health. There might be some kind of barrier to, such as deep depression or something physical that's interrupting the normal processes of what's called experience-dependent neuroplasticity, the normal processes of brain change. And also it's true that if someone is in a terrible situation, like a war zone, or they're constantly being mistreated or abused by other people, even if you're working hard inside yourself to develop things, if the world is constantly banging on you and injuring you, it's not fair to expect yourself to change so much. So if you do the practices I'm suggesting, most of the time they will work. And if they're not working, then that's a clue. There's something else to understand in your physical health or in the world around you. The other thing I'll just say quickly is that in addition to the particular thing you're growing, whatever it is, happiness, love, compassion, patience, skills, like really taking in how to be more skillful with a difficult or challenging person, or how to say something better with your wife. I'm still working on that. In addition to the specific benefit, the process you and I are talking about has built-in bonus benefits that will change your day. You start looking for good facts. You start looking for legitimate, not phony, not positive thinking, legitimate reasons to feel more patient or more grateful or compassionate or more confident in your own worth. You look for that. That changes your whole day. Instead of just kind of grinding through your day, you go, whoa, what else is happening? Okay, I see the bad facts. We got some problems here. And what else is true? That changes your day. Also built in as a bonus benefit to do the practice I'm describing, you get on your own side. You get on your own side. You're like, hey, I want to help myself. I matter. I want to be nice to myself. I want to be encouraging. I want to see myself clearly, and I want to be encouraging and nurturing, just like I am to other people. Why leave myself out, right? And then last, when you do what I'm describing here, it's really hopeful. Suddenly you feel, instead of being dead in the water, there's nothing I can do. I'm screwed. I'm stuck with who I am and where I am. Instead of that, you start focusing, I can do little things realistically every day. I can be more like a hammer and less like a nail in my own life. And that too will change your day and your week and your life altogether.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important, especially teachers tend to be very stressed, and the whole self-care or well-being of teachers is something that I think we really need to look into globally. I think it's everywhere in the world. So I think the teachers will really appreciate what you've just said about taking that time to to appreciate yourself and what you actually are doing, and they're affecting the lives of kids and children's futures and the world's future, really. So that's
100% true. And if I could just add a little thing. So far, what I've talked about is taking in, receiving into yourself the good, kind of informally in the flow of everyday life. And we can help children do that as well, just in natural little teaching moments. You're finished an interaction with a child. Instead of rushing off, take the extra 5 seconds or 10 seconds to help it sink in. And by the way, everything I'm saying here, I did not invent. People who already are excellent teachers or therapists or coaches are using methods like this. I'm simply trying to make them more explicit and to understand how they work inside your own brain. So, but in addition to these informal ways of growing over the course of the day, you can look for special moments, like when the kids come back from lunch to kind of reset and help things sink in, or at the beginning of a day as a teacher, or at the end of a day as a teacher, or when you're putting a child to bed. That's a very sweet moment. Most kids are really receptive until they become like grumpy teenagers, but or at meals. These are more formal moments, or at the end of going to church, or the end of a meditation session or a mindfulness practice. Those are more formal opportunities to really help the fruits of your efforts sink into yourself.
Yeah, I love those, and I think it is those little moments that we sometimes overlook, and we can start with those, right? What about, I know most children are hopefully well-adjusted and happy, but what if you do have a child in your class or in your home that's experienced trauma? Or you yourself have experienced trauma, what specifically could you do in that situation?
Yeah, that's a deep question. Well, as a kind of a framework that helps me, I think about 3 questions: what, why, and how to help. What's happening here? And is this just a one-time tantrum, or is this a recurring pattern? Or is this a child who looks well-adjusted on the outside, but who is self-critical and anxious and miserable on the inside? Or, is this a child who's at the 80th percentile of spiritedness and distractibility? Or is this a 99th percentile situation? What is going on here? And then the question is why? Is it because this is the child's innate biological temperament? Or is it because there's a health problem, like this is a kid who might have allergies or something else going on? Or is the why because this kid is growing up in a completely chaotic, crazy, violent, scary, impoverished setting, or being routinely beaten by a parent or a big brother, or bullied on the playground? Why? And the why is really important, because the why then takes us into what, and why take us into how. And I think it's important to not jump into how without clarity about what and why. So that's kind of a framework. So let's suppose that this is a child who's been significantly traumatized. What do you do? Well, let's first of all say and assume that this is a child who's actually getting treatment, appropriate treatment for that in some way. Maybe it's just informal, a little chat once a week with a school counselor, or maybe it's a real formal, sustained therapy, psychotherapy of some kind. And let's also assume that the active traumatization is no longer occurring, that whatever happened in the home is now different, or the child is out of that setting. Or maybe it was a one-time event and it's not going to happen again. Okay. So what can a teacher do in a mainstream classroom setting, right? I think it's a really great question. A way to think about that is, what resources would be good to grow inside the child's own mind? And when I say mind, I don't mean just intellect. That's a small part of the mind. I mean, like, what does the child experience? What's it like to be that kid every day? How does the child feel deep down inside herself or himself or them? And then, so that's the key question. What would be good to grow inside the child? And what would be good to grow inside the teacher to help this child? And maybe what would be useful that the teacher can suggest that other adults or even peers in the life of the child would be good to develop more inside themselves. This is very forward-looking, it's like we're looking for the solution. We're looking for what would help. We're looking for, in a broad word, resources. I think sometimes people get overly focused in fighting the problem, and they don't pay enough attention to what are the resources that we could develop here. Classically, if a child has gone through trauma, there are very often three major issues that are relevant for resources. And so I'll use those three to kind of structure what I'm saying here. It's not a complete account, obviously, of helping with child trauma, but I think it's really key. One, it's a violation of the child's safety. Children need safety. And so I think it's extremely important to help a child recognize truly that the current situation is safe, that others are safe, and that the child is now protected and will be protected. So, and the felt sense of safety involves relaxing and recognizing that at least in this moment, I'm basically all right. I was not all right in the past. I may not be all right in the future, but now and now and now and now, I'm basically okay. So growing that resource, which has feelings of inner calm and inner strength, really good to focus on that with a child and to be very attentive to that. Safety is our most primary need. It's the original need that all animals have, including extremely simple animals. Live to see the sunrise. Eat lunch today, don't be lunch today. That's really primal. So never forget safety. Never forget safety. Second is that trauma is a violation of agency. It's a fancy word for being able to make things happen. If you're traumatized, by definition, you could not get away, or you could not fight back. You were done to. So looking for any way for the child to experience more choice or having more influence over her world, let's say it's a girl, is really important to develop. And emphasizing the experience in the child of being someone who can make something happen, that you can choose the salt instead of the pepper. You can decide for yourself how you want to do this homework assignment. You can have control over who you sit next to. in the classroom. You can, you're the one who hit the ball in American baseball. You're the one, or cricket, I don't know, or kick it, kick the ball. So that's very important, agency. That's another key, critically important resource. And then the last thing that happens in trauma is that there were failed protectors. Every child should be protected, and there were protectors who failed. Now, maybe they could not help it. They did not know, or something happened to them too. But still, there was a sense in a child of being let down by the tribe, the village it takes to raise a child, let the child down. So giving the child many genuine experiences of others who are actually reliable and trustworthy and will not take advantage of you. You can count on them. And they like you. And they like you in a clean way. They're not trying to manipulate you to use you for themselves. So helping the child again and again and again to have authentic, based on facts, based in reality, authentic experiences of others, whether it's peers or, this is really helpful, often for kids who've been abused or traumatized, younger children, they can protect. Or non-human animals like little puppies or little cats or birds with a broken wing, they can help, or goldfish they can feed. That's very reparative. So in anyway, healthy ways for a child to feel embedded in relationships that are good, that are safe, that are reliable, that are nurturing. That's the third really important resource to grow inside. So we have growing the felt sense of safety, which has elements of calm strength, growing the felt sense of agency, that I can make things happen, and I'm not frozen and trapped, and also growing the felt sense of healthy relationships with others. Those would be three big things to focus on over time to develop inside a child in natural ways, in the flow of a regular classroom with 20 other kids or 30 running around.
Wow, that's really, really helpful. I've never heard it put quite so, it seems so simple when you when you say it that way, but it's so important for us to know and to help kids, because I think, we see it all the time. There's always somebody in the class or the next year that really needs that extra support and things. So I think those are great simple things that we can do to help.
Good.
Yeah. So just before we finish, Rick, just tell us a bit more about your thesis and your PhD, and why did you pick the preschool years, and what did you find out in your research?
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. Well, specifically, I studied 20 mother-toddler pairs, 10 boys and 10 girls, 20 mothers. And I was especially interested in when there is a collision or a conflict between the wants of the child and the wants of the parent. It's easy to raise children when you give them everything they want, or when they want everything the parent wants. That's easy. There's an old line from Buddhism, living together like milk and water. Mingling, that's great when it's like milk and water coming together. But what if it's not? What happens then? And the research shows that there is a lot of unnecessary control of children on average. On the other hand, it's important to regulate them. We have to guide them. We have to have authority. So how do we do that skillfully and well? So what I studied was this thing that many parents and teachers do, especially you could do it with the preschool age. You're less and less able to do it over time, but the fundamental idea is still there, in which when there's a problematic desire, offering an alternative and drawing the child into it. No, sweetie, not the sharp knives. How about the pretty spoons? Right? And so I studied that. It's such an interesting method. It's routine, it's common. No one ever studied it. And it's a fascinating combination of what I called gratifying control. It's both rewarding to the child, but it's still regulatory. You're guiding them down a safe path. And I think that in the process of doing that, you help children learn very deep and important lessons about wanting in general and desire in general. And I came into that topic already with a pretty deep Buddhist background, and that's a tradition that is extremely interested in healthy and unhealthy desire, skillful and unskillful desire. The Buddha did not say that desire is bad. He just said that when you get caught up in craving things or attached to results or possessive, then you can create trouble for yourself and other people. Seems pretty logical, to me. So I found that when parents do this, and I think by extension, caregivers in general, the negative affect of the child goes down and the compliance goes up. Children actually behave better when you offer alternatives to them. They start having more of an expectation that they may not get everything they want, but there still will probably be a soft landing. So they go into conflict situations feeling kind of calmer and more optimistic that it's going to turn out okay, and less inclined to go to war immediately with the parent or the teacher.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we took so many tips from today's talk and a lot of inspiration and hope as well. So I thank you very much for that, for sharing all the teachers like practical. They also like to, really have practical tips, and you really shared some great ideas with us today throughout the talk. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, I highly recommend Rick's newsletter. It really is a special one with lots of great info every week. And don't forget to download his PDF on starting out with mindfulness, and we'll have links to his books as well if you want to read more from Rick. So thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, such a pleasure and an honor, honestly. And wow, I just so thank teachers of all kinds. Really, really, really. Just where would the world be without teachers? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick.